Hello, this is Zach D. Roberts, and I'm here with Aaron Sinek, and this is the VisuNews podcast. Back again. You thought we wouldn't return, but we're back. But
like a Marvel movie or any number of other reboots of things. We just won't go away.
I'm really disappointed. So I don't know if you've seen Encanto, but you should. It is heartwarming and amazing and whatever. Never mind, who wrote the music. It is great. It is a great film. And I weep like a little baby at it for some reason. Like, oh my God, like just open sobbing for half the film. But at the end of the film, I'm just like, they all have superpowers. It's about a family that has one person strong, one person can talk to animals, one kind of thing. And like, I was just like, this is where like Disney and Marvel, the fact that they're owned by, obviously owned by Disney. I was just like, I just want like an animated Sam Jackson at the end to come on to like walk into the house in Kanto. Be like, so we want you to join the Avengers. And like that joke has been made a million times, but it's just like I watched it again last night and I was like, they did put it, because I mean like it would be really hard if you were like a Disney thing to not want to make that joke like way at the end of the credits just as like a joke. But like, obviously like Marvel would probably have to clear, just be like so many legal, maybe not legal, but like so many things going across it. Because also like Sam Jackson is a Disney, he was in The Incredibles.
Oh, that's right. He was in that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's been, when did that come out? Like,
I have no idea.
12 years ago? Like, it's been a minute. I did see that though.
I was weirdly not like a huge fan of it, but it was fine. Like, it was fine, but it just wasn't.
I mean, I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I enjoyed myself, but I think that's kind of how I feel about a lot of movies and entertainment and things in general.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially, the past like few months, like I go into most things with super low expectations now as to not have them crushed. And I think that's kind of how I'm walking into this new year, that is the same year for the third year of all of this, of our slowly decaying hellscape.
Yes.
Is that I'm walking in with low expectations so that if I enjoy something, I could be like, oh, I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt about The Matrix. That's how I felt about, I forget what else, but a bunch of other stuff. Where I was just like, oh yeah, this is probably going to be okay, or maybe has a good chance at being bad. Yeah. And then I feel I leave. Don't Look Up was the other one, right?
Yeah, same.
And I was just like, no, you know what, I enjoyed my experience. It spoke to me on this level or that level, whatever, be it The Matrix or Don't Look Up or whatever latest Star Wars shit I've watched. Mm-hmm. And yeah, then I'm not like crushed or super angry online about it. Yeah. And I could go about my day navigating the rest of this absolute dystopian hellscape in which we live.
Yeah. By the way, did you know that that's a metaphor for climate change? I don't know if you heard that or not, but that film
I had not.
That is not actually just a science, but just a film about like a meteor coming to planet. That film is a film about climate change. I did not know a climate change film was the number one thing. Oh my God. It was.
You are the first person to make that analogy. And you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb here.
Yeah.
And I am going to say something that I'm sure is pretty, no one's thought of yet.
Yeah.
But that's also probably a metaphor for our response to the pandemic and our response to the rise of authoritarianism and fascism globally.
Yeah.
Blowing minds here. Blowing minds here.
Yeah, no, I thought it was fine. Like, it was a perfectly fine film. I just was like, I was disappointed in a lot of ways just because like, I know that you have to make a film comic, like if you're making a comedy, obviously. But like, the president was like too much of like a SNL character and not enough of a like a genuine like the way that we actually have this, like the way that these things actually happening, like is by far like if you have somebody that fascism is not always going to come in the way of Donald Trump. It is going to be by far more dangerous when, whether it be Santis or somebody more reasonable sounding or whatever comes along and passes all the same bullshit, and it's just like nobody's going to give a shit. As we see, as we've seen, we're passing a lot. We're making a lot of decisions on a federal level that, to me, are akin to eugenics, and just making a decision to let people die so that the economy and the stock market keep chugging along. And everyone's fine with it. No protests. We don't have counter protests. We don't have, some pointed out, like, the 49th and likely final anniversary of Roe versus Wade was on Saturday. It was also the same weekend that would have been the 5-year anniversary of the Women's March, and there was no Women's March. Even though Roe is under attack greater than it's ever been, and it's very likely going to get overturned to some level, at least crippled to the point of pointlessness in June. And the right wing, I spent 2 days covering the March for Life shenanigans, and they're celebrating. I mean, they're celebrating, and they are not just celebrating the fact that they're winning. They're celebrating the fact that the pro-abortion side of thing, that just even the centrists aren't showing up and aren't doing anything. And they are excited about it. Like, they noted this, like I work with Liz Winstead every once in a while. She has a pro-abortion, she would actually say pro-abortion, pro-choice activist group. And she just wrote a piece for NBC about this, about the fact that, like, fascism is coming in and working with, you have Patriot Front and that sort of thing showing up at March for Life rallies. We both covered that, and nobody seems to give a shit. Like, nobody seems to care. Like, I mean, there's the same people. We know the people that care. Like, we almost on a personal level at this point, because there's only a couple thousand of them in areas. But like, where is the same exact garbage that happened during the Trump administration is happening today? Biden continued the Trump immigration policy. There's nobody showed up at immigration. Like, the groups that we donate to as a mass in this country don't seem to care. Planned Parenthood and Center for Reproductive Rights and all these groups that have thousands of employees and thousands of lobbyists and all these dozens of lobbyists around DC couldn't even be bothered to show up in any level and counter this mass gathering. I mean, it was still a smaller gathering than it had been previously. It was I don't know what a number is, 5 to 10,000. But it's still like, when's the last time we had a large gathering with those numbers? I mean, as a not even a counter, but as a protest. Like, I don't know. I've just been very disheartened.
I completely understand that. But I think there's a couple of things that work here. And one of them that absolutely has to be acknowledged is the difference between now, a year ago, and 2 years ago. And I think that biggest difference is the pandemic. And I think you have a lot of people, especially, I mean, I can't really speak to people who organize things on a national level, like these NGOs and nonprofits and stuff like that. But I can say, at least on a local level, to Chicago and maybe in some other places on from a less top-down structural thing, more autonomous types of decisions, and smaller groups and groups without a ton of money and resources and whatnot. And even some with those, folks are still very much and very justifiably concerned about dealing with a completely out of control pandemic that, government has just decided to let absolutely rip through communities. Mm-hmm. And, the choice you have to make, like the choice that, you had to make in covering both of those, and the choice I had to make when I shot the March for Life a couple weeks ago here, was like, okay, we have this out of control, pandemic where all of a sudden, we have the latest, most contagious variant of COVID, and more people are getting sick. Meanwhile, at the same time, we're just throwing all mitigations to the wind. And so I have to make the very real choice of like, okay, if I'm going to go down and shoot this thing, how sick am I going to get? And it's not just, because, of course people are like, oh, well, it's outside, so it's safer. And it's like, yeah, I still got to get there. Still got to get on public transit. I might need a bathroom, so I still got to go, into, a place to use a bathroom, or, if I'm there all day, like, I'm going to stop somewhere and get a sandwich, so I'm putting myself, I'm adding risk points to it. And I remember I was meeting, before the March for Life here in Chicago, I was meeting a freelance colleague of both of ours, and he had to stop at the camera store on his way. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to go meet him there. And I looked inside and I could see him in line, and I could see the line. And it was it's a very small camera store. Great people. And I'm like, okay, this is a small place, there are 36 people inside, and, everybody's wearing masks and whatnot, but I don't know what the ventilation is like there, and and so I spent 20 minutes standing outside until it was too damn cold. and so I'm sitting there going like, okay, do I risk exposure, or do I risk exposure? That's the joke. See what I did there?
I get it.
but so no, I think you have that, and then you also have the very real kind of like, people who are trying to organize in their own sort of communities, to still help people survive. And in Chicago, I think on a very local level, there are lots of other things, at least, that were going on here, especially at the time. I mean, what with people trying to, get the schools here in order and things like that, it's a matter of risk. And I think you'll find a lot of people who, the right's going to show up for these things because they don't give a shit, anti-mask, anti-vax, will show up.
I mean, here's the question though. I mean, like, that was we have vaccines now. It is theoretically safer. Last year we did not, and the previous year we did not. And mass numbers. I mean, the number of Black Lives Matter and George Floyd protests, I was at. Where are the I mean, I'm not talking about the like hardcore activists that do this, that like look at like, this is what we show up to. I'm talking about the Sunday, the Saturday morning activists, the Women's March, like masses and things like that. Where the hell are they at all? Because I can tell you online, they're saying, oh, suddenly it's dangerous to do this, even though last year they were out in the streets. The previous year before that, they were out in the streets occasionally, very, very occasionally. And now they're saying, well, basically, like, let's just ignore them. I mean, like, let's just like move on. I mean, this is the same thing that happened. Like, obviously the pandemic, obviously everything like that. I totally understand that. But y'all are still going to fucking Chili's. You're all still going to this. I mean, like, look, we're not. I'm not taking any unneeded risks that I don't do. The only time I go to like a coffee place or something like that, it's a large ventilated area that people, are safe there. I make very conscious decisions on everything I do, and I get that. But you can go into middle America, or you go into a lot of places, and people are still packed into Starbucks. People are still packed into these places, drinking coffee with masks up, everything like that. And so like, it is horseshit that the masses, not the activist core, but like the fact that the masses are saying, no, now suddenly it's not safe enough to do it. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you're still living your life and still doing everything that you're doing, but you just won't show up to protests. You won't show up to counter protests. And like that decision, which is by far safer to show up at a rally at a distance and at least make a presence shown for an hour or do something, than it is to go to a restaurant and have, your quesadillas. Like, I'm sorry. And so it's just like, I look at, and I get that you're burnt out. We're all burnt out. But just say then that I've made the decision to let it happen. Just say that, okay, I'm done. I'm tired. I'd rather just focus on I'd rather just focus on my kids and my family, and everything's going to be fine. This is the biggest thing that I'm just kind of tired of, because I remember the same goddamn thing in 2008. Obama won, and the anti-war movement evaporated overnight. Like the same activists, I still see the same organizers, that did, UFJP and everything like that. They're still out there. I get it. And the same core, but like the people that showed up, the hundreds of thousands of people that showed up to counter George Bush, evaporated, even though Obama was doing the exact same policy points when it came to the Iraq war, when it came to Afghanistan, and doing that war the same way that Bush did it. It's not like he dramatically changed and like had a plan to leave or anything like that. He didn't do that. Biden is doing the same thing. He's made decisions. Never mind not coming through with any of his policy points that he could even get through, like student debt or anything like that. But is literally making the decisions to, okay, we're not doing, he literally, everything is off the table. Shutdowns are off the table. Bringing back any sort of unemployment is off the table. Extended unemployment is off the table. And this is, to me, what I go is that if I wasn't who I was, if I was just a straight white dude who maybe didn't have any friends that would be affected by Trump, whatever, I go, was I better off? And again, not me. I just want to like preface this when it is taken, if it ever is taken out of context, but I have to look in and go, financially, was I better off under Trump, or was I better off under Biden? I know which one. I know which one I was. It is not under Biden. Extended unemployment was a savior when I lost my job. The moment if I lost my job again in New York State, I would have $140 a week. I would not be able to do it. I'd have to put myself at risk. And this is the same. And I get it that it wasn't Trump. It was the parties, that pushed these things, or it was it was Congress that pushed these things. But that same Congress is in there, and there's more Democrats than there was in that. And for some reason, we can't even consider anything that might alleviate the financial strain or the health strain on anybody. We're going to get tests at some point. Like at some point, that's the bar, is tests. Oh, they're going to send masks to us too. Great. Cool. How many years in? I mean, and I get it. Biden's a year in, but he's 25% into his thing. And we all know that the final year of once 2022 elections happen, it's all over. It's literally, we're all old enough to remember the Obama administration and what that was like when you had a right wing, and it is going to make the Obama years look comical. Like how gentle the Republican Party were on it. There are already Congress people talking about doing indictments and putting people in jail, like Fauci and that sort of thing. Members of Congress doing this, and once they get that power, they won't hesitate to use that power the way that Nancy Pelosi and the rest of the Democratic Congress people and the January 6th Commission can continually hold back on doing it, because they're terrified of the response that the right will have. And I go, well, what's the point of being in power if you refuse to use that power for good, for bad, for whatever the thing is? And I just go, the only response we have, because voting doesn't seem to make a goddamn bit of difference. I mean, don't not vote. Vote, for fuck's sake. I'm not saying that. I will never say that. I'll never be that person. Show up to vote. But all that their response is, well, we need more Democrats. And I go, okay, well, the problem is that we keep getting shitty Democrats. And so you have to do the best case scenario that we can do, because of the primary system and the way everything is goddamn fucked in our democracy. And the Democratic Party is so dramatically fucked. In the way that it stops people from, AOC is the dramatic exception. Only that type of person can only really come to power in a very set of certain circumstances, and at a certain time and place. And you have to surprise them too, And so the only thing we can do is try to push our politicians to do better and make them know that we're going to be a lot less hesitant to show up to vote, or we're going to be a lot less hesitant to give you money or do anything that you need in 2022 if you don't do the things that we're demanding you to do. And if you just don't fucking show up at all, or even letter campaigns or anything like that, then then we're just going to have the same, and we're going to fucking lose. And I say, not we as a Democratic Party member, I am not, and I never will be. I'm saying as a person who doesn't want to see fascism in full bore come into our country, because if we lose 2022, as like anyone left of fascists, we're losing 2024 without a fucking doubt. And that means that Trump or whatever the Republican put up is coming into power, and they will have everything. And literally, I've seen the signs, Trump 2024, the revenge. Those flags exist already.
Oh, I know they do.
And so it's just like, anyway. And
no. I mean, I think there are a lot of points, you really hit. And I think that's in part, in a lot of cases, because of Democratic politicians and major Democratic organizations, their unwillingness, as you've already articulated, to take the right on head on. But a lot of these other organizations, that we talk about, these NGOs, whatever, these people who, try to put resources behind these mass mobilizations, there is an unwillingness there to challenge Democrats. And all of that right now is because for at least, the last decade, but I would argue, honestly, the last 20 to 30 years or more. But I'll just speak to the last 2 decades, because those are the easiest ones for me to recall. And, prior to 2000, I was, barely 21. So, is just the fact that we continually, and this comes from the right, it comes from Democrats, it comes from pundits of all stripes, as we push this binary. And we push this binary that, well, if you criticize a Democrat, obviously the only other option is that you want Trump to win, or you want a Republican to win. And the Democratic Party's core and leadership take that and use that to put down more progressive, more leftist, whatever elements, wings, candidates, all that part of the party gets crushed, in that, Biden or, any number of other Democratic candidates over the past 20 years will promise the moon. And then as soon as they get elected, well, we can't do this. Well, we can't do that. We really can't make Joe Manchin unhappy, or, Sinema unhappy, because, we don't want to lose those seats. And it's like, you've already lost them. They are not part of, they don't care about your agenda. They care about themselves, just like a lot of other people. And people who are suffering, and people who want more resources to survive this pandemic, or universal healthcare, or free college, or, any number of other things that people are desperately aching for and have been demanding for, my whole damn life, get pushed to the wayside until it's time for them to come vote again for the same Democrats, and we do the same thing over and over again ad nauseum. And, I mean, that's where this is at. And, I honestly, this is a rant, but I'm also just lamenting here, because this is just, it's Lucy pulling away the football over and over and over again. And that allows the right, and that allows fascists to gain more power and more support every time it's done. And it's just, Democrats have spent more time, I shouldn't say more time, but Democrats have spent plenty of time fighting teachers unions, or fighting workers, or fighting, low wage workers unions. They have spent plenty of time fighting them, just like the right has. And, before they eventually capitulate and they're like, oh, okay, well, we have to throw you a crumb or two so that, you'll come back. And it's just stunning how we keep falling, or how people keep falling for it. And I think that engineers in itself a lot of political apathy, because why and this was something I wrote a zine a long time ago, back during the Bush.
Explain what a zine is for the children.
Anyway, yes. No. So it's like a blog, but it's made out of wood. I will admit, I don't know.
I like the idea that people are like cuneiform tablets. Is this how old is that?
Like carvings in the side
chisels. Aaron brought down the tablets from no, not those type of tablets. Anyway,
not the stone ones. But I did a zine during the Bush years about why I didn't vote at the time. And I remember and it was I think it was prior to the 2004 election, so sometime between 2003 and 2004. I honestly, it was so damn long ago, right? Yeah. But so I had a longtime friend of mine. So I went to this party on election night in 2004, and my friends at this party, a lot of them had seen it and read it, and so when Bush won, all of a sudden, instantly, it was my fucking fault. Yeah. That Bush won. It was my fault because I didn't vote, despite living in a solid blue state that has been solid blue for damn ever. That was solid blue that year, et cetera, et cetera. And so you flash forward to this New Year's. So I was talking to a dear friend of mine who was at that party, and they were like, "Listen, man, I just want to tell you. Remember that zine you did back during the Bush years? I'm really sorry for being a jerk to you because I totally understand how you feel, right?" And I was like, okay, and the irony about this, of course, is like, I did eventually start voting, but again, in much more local elections where I felt that my choice made much more of a difference. Of course, I still voted in national elections, but I will never be a person that tries to vote shame or fault someone like, oh, this is your fault because you didn't, because when we go down that road, what ends up happening is it's, you could tell somebody who's a Democratic super fan, like, oh, well, I did, I voted for, I voted in the primary and then I voted in the, in the general.
Don't forget, it's not just voting, it's you have to vote for the right person. God forbid you vote for Nader, and then, or something like Bernie. That. Like,
God help you. Well, you voted for Bernie.
You can't even vote. And you get guilted even if you voted for Bernie in the primary and then voted for nothing. Thankfully, I only vote in general elections, or only vote in no primaries, but because I refuse to.
No, that's fair, and that's fair. But even when you did, and even when you vote for the quote right person, the next response is, oh, well, you still didn't do enough. You should have been knocking on doors, or you should have been giving your whole life, or you should have been giving money or whatever. And it's like, guys, why am I going to devote that much time and effort of myself to these people, especially national candidates who literally have billions of dollars to spend, when I'm getting literally almost nothing in return? The only thing I'm doing is I'm putting another slice of duct tape over the gaping hole in the dam that is coming towards me. And, with the water is rushing out, it's filling up, it's at our shoulders right now. And I'm putting another slice of duct tape on it, man. Like you cannot. And this is also, where so much of the trapping gets in, because this is, it's not just left outliers or, fringe people or however they want to be described. It's 40 some odd % of Americans that don't come out, less in the midterms, or more that don't come out in the midterms. And so you can't keep thinking that, oh, well, we're not as bad as these fascists who have gotten much worse is going to keep driving people. You have to give people something they want. And right now, all we're giving people is like, well, okay, well, hey, listen, we got you masks. We got you 3 of them. And we got you tests. We got you 4 for your apartment building. How about that? How about that, Jack? Yeah. And that when literally in a year, we could have nationalized production on that drop of a hat, we could have on both of those things, testing and whatnot. I mean, I look back, you familiar with the Google, I'm just going to call it the Google COVID test.
No, what do you mean?
This came out I want to say it was a couple of months ago. No, maybe even a couple of weeks ago, was when the story specifically related to Google started hitting the news cycle, but it actually goes back quite a bit further. I use Google as the example because what they have been doing for months now is they send full-time employees within the US free at-home tests that deliver results within minutes and retail for more than $70 each. These tests are similar, if not the same, to the testing kits that both the NBA and the Department of Defense use for their employees. They are definitely a lot more expensive, according to the company that's selling them. Thing one to keep in mind. And they are definitely, obviously more scarce. However, when I worked out the basic math of it, it would cost a couple of $100 billion to send every American, at least, one of the at-home test kits, and then the actual testing, because there's the machine, I guess, and then there's the individual test that you have to use, right? Anyway, in the show notes we'll post the numbers. And this was, like I said, this was basic. I hadn't had coffee yet, and I'm reading this going, what the absolute living fuck about this? The basic math was, it was under a third of the DoD's budget for this year alone to get every American these testing kits. And the best that we can do is 4 tests per household. So my friend that's got 4 kids, they got tests for their kids, no tests for themselves. My partner and we got 2 tests.
No, you just have to make the decisions. Which child do you love the most? And those are the ones that get tested. That's how it works, right? It doesn't. On the other hand, also, you really only need one test in that type of family, because if one person gets COVID, all of them are getting COVID.
Sometimes yes.
No, I know. I'm making a joke.
It's true. I've got a friend who, their family, first it was 2 out of the 4 of them, then 3 out of the 4 of them, and so the other one's just waiting. But still, so far so good, but it's only been a couple days, right? But again, none of this is the response to the pandemic that we were promised versus the response that we got versus the response that we know we are capable of, that everyone, even if they can't articulate, point by point all of the details, we have spent 2 decades living with multiple forever wars that were launched after 3,000 people were killed. We're going to hit 1 million. We're going to hit 1 million dead
if we haven't
within. We're over 800,000. I know.
Oh no, I just mean with the counts. When we talk
with the
about
count, things being
that's one thing. When we talk about how many people have COVID at any given time, and the fact that home testing is so widespread, a lot of people aren't going to go get tested because they were like, oh well, I got this home test thing. It says I got it. I took a second one, confirmed it. Boom. And then that doesn't count at all, even though that person is usually, hopefully, at least out of the workforce, and B, they have COVID. But there's no national documentation of that. So we don't actually know what the numbers are. They're probably double, at any given time. The fact that everyone in this country hasn't gotten it at least once at this point is kind of shocking. I have very little doubt that I've gotten it at some point. There's no way that I haven't gotten it at some point. If I don't have it this past week when I've been sick. But
Well,
anyway.
but I mean, that's the whole thing. And that's like, that's the other demoralizing part about this, I think, for people in general, is that, uh, the let it rip strategy, which has been a response, I think, to the very real, right-wing push to let it rip.
Mhm.
Right. And is connected to this sort of like other buildup and recruitment drive for other aspects of that, of authoritarian movements,
Mhm.
is that, once again, our nation's response to 800,000 plus dead is to let it rip for the economy and let it rip so we don't piss off Republicans. And meanwhile, they're just grabbing more and more. And that's that, there has never been a firm line that Democrats have held against this, and that, I think, is the thing that's least, it's not only uninspiring, it inspires you to, be like, well, what the hell is the point? Okay,
I mean, like, all of this is kind of my point, though, is that like the party structures that are supposed to allow us to basically not be continually participating, and Aaron was entering the waiting room, is sorry, I have to remember to edit that out. But the problem is that we need to understand that going forward, the Democratic Party or the Republican Party is not actually listening to us and representing us, and act just the ordinary person or whatever. The Republican, the right wing knows that. They know that. They know that for like a lot of the anti-mandate people and that sort of thing, that the Republican Party didn't want to go far enough, quick enough for them. And so they organized, they held mass rallies, and showed up at people's houses. I mean, like, obviously, I'm not saying people should start threatening, school boards and things like that, but like, they won that fight, and they took over the Republican Party, and it is over. The Republican Party is now is a pro-COVID, anti-mandate, anti-mask, anti-vaccine party that is 100% done. It is no longer the party of, whatever imagined, whenever the Republican Party was a just conservative values and things like that. That never fucking existed. But the imagination that the party of Ronald Reagan exists anymore, it doesn't. It's not even the party of Donald Trump, who is actually saying, y'all should go consider getting this thing that I helped create, because his ego won't allow him. That actually may be the only saving grace that he may end up losing, because he won't stop promoting the vaccine and boosters. Like, it is actually genuinely shocking, because of his fucking fevered ego, he may end up losing. That's like literally, I think, our only chance of not having President Trump in 2024, is this idea that he won't give up that idea because he is too invested in it. In the same way, it's like he'll never stop talking about his steaks, even though that company long failed. What I mean? Like, or whatever, his wine or his whatever, even though like his hotel chain is terrible. What I mean? But it's just like, we have to do that. We have to look to the Republican Party. I mean, it's funny, because I've talked to a lot of people on the far right, and they talk about the left with like this odd level. I wouldn't say respect. I wouldn't even say fear. I don't know. This level, they go, look at the left out organizes us. They know how to organize. They do things. They do hold rallies. I don't remember. Do you remember the right, like before the Tea Party, the right wing? I don't remember ever covering a protest of the right wing, or like a rally. Like, they just didn't hold rallies in the way that they do now. Like, most of the protests that I've covered over the last 4 years, including the big, anti-Trump rallies that we had, the Science March and the Women's March and everything like that, by far, I've covered way, way more. And this is not just because I cover the far right. I covered by far more right-wing rallies than left-wing rallies, than like counter whatever, I don't want to say left-wing rallies, but left of center rallies, or counter protest or protest and that sort of thing. They have taken that way of protest over, and they ended up winning their party. Unlike the left, which is always just fine, giving up the moment that and again, the left, I'm saying left of whatever Trump, liberals, everything included, they are perfectly fine with giving up and like going back to their homes the moment that the bullshit centrist politician that they elect, that doesn't actually believe in anything that they marched in the streets for doing. I mean, it's massive frustration. I have this frustration every single time there's a party change in the presidency, because it happens. You know, I mean, like the fact that like it happened in 2008, 2009, every single movement disappeared. The only constant has been Bob Abakin, Code Pink, and maybe one other group. And it's just like, and it's sad because it's like, they're how I'm not gonna, I don't want to include Medea and Code Pink in with Bob Abakin, but like it's just like, at least they're fucking consistent and they actually believe their principles, as opposed to the rest of the country, which seems to be just perfectly fine for the most part. And just, I mean, has there been counter protests like at school board meetings? I mean, like if we're organizing at a local, I hear this, it was like, oh, well, we need to focus on the local. And I go, yes, we do. I definitely agree. We should have done this 20 years ago when Karl Rove said he has a 20-year plan to take over the fucking local elections. And he won that fight because we ignored it, because we thought that electing Obama was I guess we could just go home. And again, I just want to preface, I'm not talking about the actual organizers, the protest. I mean, like the core people that actually show up to this shit. I'm talking about the masses. Is that like the masses of people that claim that they care, they change their, they do the hashtag activism and things like that. Where did the resistance go? Where did these people go? Like, and that's, I mean, I know you don't disagree with me on that. So like,
I don't necessarily disagree, but I also don't necessarily agree. And I think it's because we have to go back a little further and sort of analyze what happened to both the sort of, resistance to George W. Bush, but also the anti-war movement. Because I don't feel that the anti-war movement died overnight. I feel, and as somebody who is a part of it, the anti-war movement died a very slow death. And in part, that was definitely that was in a big way on Republicans, of course, and the right, of course, but also it was in a big way on Democrats as well. And that's because Democrats supported the damn war. And so you did have this mass mobilization. I mean, I was just recalling to a friend of mine the other day, being on Lakeshore Drive in 2003 with 10,000 people, being in DC in 2003 with, I think it was around 300,000 people.
Yeah. I mean,
those are not small.
I was at the
numbers.
New York City. I was at the GOP when they had the convention in New York City. And again, Rudy Giuliani was there. Let's all remember that. Like before, he was America's mayor and everyone loved him. He was there with George W. Bush. And there's I think 500,000 people. It was one of the largest protests, if not more. I mean, I just remember literally just seeing people to the end. I've never been at a larger protest. I don't know if the Women's March in DC was larger. But it is, but those are the people that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about like, yes, the anti-war movement didn't go away. I'm talking about, and I guess, it's like, obviously no one listening to this is probably those people. So like, I don't know why I'm complaining to this crowd, but it's just like, but I'm also complaining about and like, look at it's Democrats. I'm not, they take a lot of blame or whatever. I'm talking about Planned Parenthood. I'm talking about the well-funded groups that can get out the vote, or get out the people. They can get their masses out. They haven't sent out an email. They haven't said, let's show up somewhere, let's do something. They haven't done action emails. They haven't done anything. they have just decided that we're now past the first year, like the comfortable time period where we're supposed to not complain to people. I just don't see any idea that we're going to see any protests to try to get our elected leaders to do anything. The Republicans do it. I wouldn't even say Republicans. The right wing does it. The conservatives do it. The Democrats don't fucking do it. Liberals and they don't do it. They don't want anything. God forbid you even criticize any Democratic elected leader, unless of course it's AOC, who's perfectly fine to criticize any day you want, according to any liberal. But this is my issue. I get COVID, I get it, but it's just y'all are going again. You're all going to the fucking Applebees. We all fucking know it. Nothing's changed in your life. Your kids are going to school. You trust your kids to go to school, but for some reason, who are unvaccinated, I'm not anything, but like for some reason you won't go out in March. Like if you're going to use that as an excuse.
But I'm going to go back to where I was a second ago, because there is a progression here that I think needs to be recognized, and that is what happened between 2004 and 2008 to the anti-war movement. It was just a matter of like, okay, we all marched, we shut shit down, we got arrested, we got our asses kicked. That war still went on, and that war kept going. And so by the time, because I remember being at an anti-war march in 2007, and it was maybe 100 people. And that's down, and that's because at some point people just felt defeated and deflated by this still happening. And so I think what happened was then you had 08 come around, and it was like, oh, okay, now I can be excited about Obama or whatever. And it takes a while during a Democratic presidency for more people to kind of coalesce and for people to start seeing them. So I remember during the Obama years, we did see, at least from my own experience here in Chicago covering things, we definitely saw, protests related to Obama's immigration policy specifically. And those carried on through literally his farewell speech, where someone was escorted out for, having I think it was a couple of people actually, but I remember I got a photo of one person holding a big ass sign at that thing. And so at the time though, in addition to that, the sort of like, you have to remember back then the right was only just starting. The Reagan years and the Bush years in a lot of cases, especially for white people, especially for straight people and folks who are not marginalized. The right was saying the quiet part quiet. The difference between the Reagan years, but the policies were still there. The policies that harmed people, the policies that helped further, racism and economic inequality and all those things, they were all still there. And they were also being supported by Democrats as well. The difference that happened over 20 years, and I'm getting a little off track here, but the difference that happened in the post 9/11 world, and especially once Trump became president, was that the right just went, fuck it, we're going to say the quiet part loud now.
Yeah.
And, we're going to, and in fact, we're going to just push it as far as we can. So there was that. And I think you saw, and again, you kind of have to go back to, only 10 years ago, similar thing happened with Occupy, whereas, Occupy was this moment for a while where, mass mobilizations all over the country, arguably, we can do 5 episodes on that, and we probably already have, on some of the things that, that particular movement and that particular moment changed.
That was our Vietnam, but yeah. If we were a different type of people, we'd have leather vests that had like Occupy patches on it. And
well, I would have been dressed exactly as how I was, and I probably was dressed the same as I was during the anti-war movement, or back during the when the last embers of the no WTO movement was happening. But two things happened, and you were talking about how the right, you don't remember them having rallies. But they did, especially post 9/11. They weren't organized like Trump rallies, but you had people in every city running around with them waving American flags, screaming at people who were, screaming at, Muslim people and really anyone who wasn't white. You had that happening. And so they were out there. Somebody, there was a group of people on 9/11 who tried to burn down a damn mosque, in Chicago, well, in the suburbs of Chicago, but like, so that force existed. But also that sort of nationalism and that quote patriotism and all that, that was just baseline for people. And so, you get to Occupy, that happens, and then you get to, Ferguson, and you get to Black Lives Matter. And I think, again, you have this sort of, autonomous mass uprising of people who are trying to, who they're not organized, they're not donating money to the DCCC. They're not, whatever. They're in the streets. And then what happened during that is you had, similarly, when other big mass movements happen, you have some people in those mass movements who decide, hey, I'm actually going to run for office, and they try and they win, or they try and they lose. But when that sort of tipping point happens, then the centrists come in, the Democrats come in and say, okay, well, we need to start, quote, listening to these people, and we need to start. And there is a little bit of listening, but there's really just more co-option of things. And so that's how we end up with people who have, in this house, we respect, we believe Black Lives Matter, and we believe, all people are equal. And also we support, Biden's terrible immigration policy, or we support our brave first responders, which include the police, or whatever. The message of the more radical wings of things gets muddled and co-opted, and eventually watered down so hard, and it's disheartening for people. It's not only disheartening for people, but people also realize, okay, this isn't working anymore, so we have to try something else. There's always, and that, I think, we need to absolutely talk about that and think about that a lot harder, because that is, these are things that have happened multiple times in history. So it's not just, meanwhile, all this same time is happening, the right is organizing on an epic level to literally paint anyone who is not them as a radical communist who is going to destroy everything we love and blah, 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 blah. I mean, the biggest complaint Democrats had, or the biggest worry Democrats had over the past 2 cycles has been, well, we don't want to appear too far left because they're going to call our candidate a communist.
Do it anyway.
They're doing it anyway. They have been doing it anyway. They're going to keep doing it. Don't, just go for it. Just absolutely go for it. I mean, I'm going to harp on like some of the more local stuff, which is like, and absolutely. Once again, I will predicate this by saying I do not trust any billionaire. I do not trust any politician. I have plenty of criticisms of this particular politician that I'm about to invoke. But the one thing that happened, we had Bruce Rauner for 4 years, and it was a disaster. And things got a hell of a lot worse, especially fiscally here, especially when it came to services provided for people that a government should be providing for people. And it got a hell of a lot better for rich people, and it got a hell of a lot better for the right. But so one of the things that that was done in Illinois here, it was like, what? We don't need to be, it was still milquetoast. It was still like, we'll be milquetoast about fight for 15, but we'll still pass 15. We just won't do it till 2022 or whatever, right? But we'll incremental increases. But the dude still signed that bill. And so we're still seeing wage increases for people every year. And that is something that is huge for people. We are still seeing, these things that are, I would argue, are the bare minimum, absolute bare minimum. But that's the point we're at now, where the bar is so low, it is falling through a chasm, in a pit, in the basement, under the fucking floorboards. And so a little bit of competency goes a long way. I mean, Illinois is one of the best managed states as far as the pandemic goes in a lot of cases, And, you know, despite the right, you know, and the right here trying to organize and say, well, this is communist tyranny and blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, man, fuck that. Actually, you know what? It's not. And we've just been giving people the bare minimum of things. You know, and it's not without its faults, and it's not without, you know, its problems or, you know, things to rightfully criticize, but it could be a hell of a lot worse, and in a lot of other places it is. And so that is the kind of attitude, that is the literal least Democrats could do on a national scale, which is give people something that you actually promised, you know. And that's something that, you know, we're not doing. Instead, we're going to do another, you know, well, these people are even worse fascists than Trump, which they are. They absolutely are. It's not going to be enough to motivate people. And when people are struggling in more of a way, I mean, we used to lament this all the time, and I'm sure you remember this too, you know, during, you know, the Occupy days or during the anti-war days, why aren't more people out here? You know, and in a lot of cases, it's, you know, well, they're also struggling with so many personal things. It's really hard to get out, you know, be it what the hell ever. That same thing exists now, but on a much higher level. And I think, you know, another, you know, but for all of the like shit that the right will talk about how, oh, all of these protests are funded by, you know, mysterious deep state cabal and, you know, whatever. You look at the Tea Party, you look at these anti-mask, you know, anti-vax rallies, so much of the organization and support is coming from some of the wealthiest right-wing organizations, you know, and it's because it's projection.
But they're not. I mean, this is one thing that I think that I've kind of always tried to harp on, but like we need to come to terms with the fact that as much as like the far right, the Tea Party, all these things are well funded, the events are great, there's always hand warmers. I mean, there's just like, I mean, like there's always stuff there that like usually aren't at like lefty rallies. Like there's nice buses or whatever, but they're still showing up. They're still taking time either off work or from their weekend or whatever and doing it. And like, so it does still, even if they're not paid, so few times. Yes, we had some of the coal. There has been examples of times that like the Koch brothers or whoever else paid for people to show up. But like the people, the I don't want to say 10,000, couple thousand people that showed up at the in DC at that anti-vax rally, they were not paid to be there. They were not paid to be there. There was not even universal signs. There wasn't even like you show up to a rally and we're going, oh, that's interesting that all the signs that are there are manufactured by, you know, the same thing. It's the same thing. Almost everybody had their homemade signs, which is like, to me, one of those really big really notifiers to be like, oh shit, people actually give a shit about this. Like, this isn't just like a weekend thing. And like, but on the other hand, they also make it that the right has done an excellent job of something that the left used to do, which is make these things like basically events that you don't miss, whether it be singers, I mean, just performers or just like the right speakers being there, you know, just making it like, no, there's a 2-month lead in or a month lead in. Like, that's why one of the reasons that the Women's March was so huge is that there was a month and a half lead in to it being, they had a date, they had a time, they had a place, they had like the cities, they had a website, they had everything set up. And that is not fucking happening in any way, shape, and form. And that's one of the ways you get people to actually give a shit. And you can, I mean, like, look at the Democratic Party has a lot to blame on a lot of things, but like, they're not going to organize anything. They're not going to get people to get out to organize or do anything. That is the job of the large, again, we're doing small activism. We're doing community activism. I'm not talking about those guys. I'm talking about the shit that we've seen over the last, we've seen over the last 20 years, the large nonprofits, the large groups that are well-funded, at least on the scale of, you know, lefty, you know, left of center funding or whatever. The ACLU raised tens of millions of dollars during the Trump administration. Where the fuck is that money? They're not fighting court cases left and right. They're not doing that shit. They organize specifically political action money and they raise tens of millions of dollars. And They held the last protest they held, I think, was in 2018. Of anything. I don't even see the banners that say ACLU or whatever and that sort of thing. Where is Planned Parenthood? Where's their Center for Reproductive Rights? They didn't show the fuck up. I mean, the numbers of people, Center for Reproductive Rights, I'm sorry, did show up. They had a bunch of employees at December 1st when not Casey. I'm blanking on the Supreme Court case going, but when the Supreme Court was hearing the case on December 1st, and we were outnumbered 5-1, and basically groups did their thing and then left, and then they stuck around and held rallying, and they mocked the fuck. I was at a law summit on the night before the March for Life, and they mocked the fuck out of the fact that the left couldn't even be bothered to show up at this thing. And
out of curiosity,
yeah.
Because I God, I don't even remember. Am I muted?
Nope, I can hear you.
Okay. I don't even remember, honestly, if I did one of the March for Life rallies prior to this year. But two things about it, about this year's, at least the one in Chicago. One, a good chunk of the participants were absolutely not city dwellers, because you could see when you walk down Michigan Avenue and you got far south enough, you could see charter bus after charter bus after charter bus. That money's coming from somewhere.
No, but so this is, I mean, that is exactly my point, is like, we could fund that money. UFJP used to organize buses, and it'd be $10 or whatever. Right. I came in on a bus to DC to cover one of the DC rallies for $12 or whatever it was back in 2003. My point is, though, that they're showing up and they're doing it, and that there is organization, and that, like, and even if it's 1,000 people, even if, or I mean, I personally like the idea. Like, yes, you have the big center ones, you have New York, you have DC, you have LA, you have Chicago, maybe Seattle, whatever, Portland or something. But like, well, I like it when groups organize. No, we want 100 people in Syracuse. We want 200 people in Harrisburg. We want, like, focusing on like local levels. I like that idea. I like that idea a lot more than having the big rallies, but that's not fucking happening. And again, from the big groups, from ACLU, from Planned Parenthood, from these things, literally we in 5 months, Roe versus Wade is likely going to be overturned. It's not like we have time to the state, and also like in April is when state legislatures basically mostly end their sessions. And the right wing, I literally have heard them talk about this. The right wing is planning. They go, we must make sure that state legislatures have it in their plan to already pass legislation overturning abortion, overturning Roe versus Wade, or doing whatever it allows on the books, so that they come to term, bad terminology, so that it comes to when Roe versus Wade is fucked with, whatever, in June, and the state leges are not in session, that law becomes law immediately, because they're not going to miss time period, so that hoping that maybe Congress, or God forbid Congress does something, God forbid there even be an attempt to do something in Congress to do about abortion, because we can't even talk about that because we're very but they are prepared. And so if Roe v. Wade gets overturned in June, which again almost everybody I talk to thinks is going to happen to some level at least, the state legislatures are ready and are going to have it. You're not going to have until the next session of state leg. And so you're going to have it in June. We're going to have this happen. And the fact that there's not even organizing on again, from Planned Parenthood, from the people that have money. There are people who are giving a shit on a local level and whatever. There's activists, smaller ones, but they're not showing up. They don't have money. They don't have the ability to lobby people. They don't have the ability to do the things that these larger, very well-funded organizations do. And I'm not seeing anything. I'm not seeing the ads on Facebook that you do. I mean, during the Trump administration, it was just everywhere. And it's just like, you got to get people to care. And it takes a long time to get people to give a shit. I mean, no one gave a shit. I mean, how long did it take to really get motivated about Trump? It literally was like November, and people were like, oh my God, we actually have to give a shit about this. Oh my God. And like, that was like a year and a half of him running and being like, this is who I am, and this is who I am, and polling continually like 80%, and no one gives a shit. By June, it's all going to be fucking over with. And then we're going to have to not just change law, not just, do prevention techniques. We're going to have to abort these goddamn laws as well, that are already going to be on the books. And it's going to be too fucking late. And I just don't understand. I'm like, I just don't. And talk to other people within this movement, with specifically that work within the reproductive rights movement, and they don't fucking understand either. So it's not just me being completely separated from this, and they don't understand what the hell is going on. And yes, the Democratic Party probably not giving a shit about that. It has a lot to do with it. But I'm talking about the larger organizations. Like when we rally, when maybe there's a couple thousand people in DC in June, when the Supreme Court comes down with their ruling, it's too late. It's too late. And this is what the left always does every single time. We have to lose, and then we show up. The right wing, though, like they know what they're doing. It's just
the thing is that is a great point, and that was exactly where I was going to go with this, which is that there is a big element of the left that does show up and shows up beforehand.
Yeah.
That element just gets silenced, sidelined, marginalized, or turned into the bad actor. And that is something that is the fault, I believe, of literally everyone that is not part of, that particular portion of the left, because, of course, you had like as going specifically to the, the fight with Roe versus Wade, there was, a rally for abortion justice here in Chicago. That was part of a national day of action. You mentioned it earlier, that had thousands of people turn out. The one thing that a lot of these organizations like that don't do is they don't go directly confront, like from an organizational standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Individuals do, at Chicago's, anti-abortion March for Life rally, there were about 200 to 300 counter demonstrators there.
Yeah,
absolutely. That were like, one, literally across the street, two, people going to, the anti-abortion people had to walk through them,
mm-hmm.
and three, who were attacked by the cops once, if not twice. Once that I was there and got photos from and got shoved during. And that is those are things that these larger NGOs and groups don't want to do. So they won't tell people not to go to them, but they're not going to put the support there for people to go to them. Yeah. And I think, the same thing has happened with, people trying to fight for police reform or police, defunding the police, or absolute, police abolition, in that you have had for years now a massive movement nationwide of people coming out, for that, proactively, like, hey, because it's not even proactive. I mean, it's still reactive to all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And then they are told by the people in power, by legislators, and by all of these other groups like the ACLU or like whoever, that, oh, no, you can't, that's too radical, that's too much, that's too far. Mm-hmm. You're taking it too far. We have to be a lot more incrementalist about it. And that loses people. That loses everybody who literally got the shit beat out of them. Yeah. Because it's like, why the fuck am I, and I think, unless people do still continue to show up, in some cases they do, we did get something here in Chicago, with the most recent, our most recent, elected civilian, the ECPS ordinance here. It is far from adequate. It is far from, enough. But it was a small start, and even that small start is already being parroted about as, oh, the police have been completely defunded and Chicago is a war zone. And it doesn't even, it only provides a little bit of base accountability. It doesn't, do enough, but that is enough for the right to react, and then for, you know, centrist Democrats and the most powerful people to say, well, wait a minute. Okay, maybe we should, you know, backtrack a little bit on this. And it's like, you've already backtracked so far.
Yeah.
And so, you know, until these organizations realize, you know, whoever they are, you know, politicians or organizations realize, and it's far too late, you know, in a lot of cases, until they realize that, no, you can't just keep capitulating because the right pushes that line. You know, that they push, you know, the Overton window is moving, and it has been moving for years. And the fact that, like, people are, you know, you can't even give people basic. You know, so I think we agree. It's just we're coming to it from two different.
I would also say, I mean, hats off continually to Chicago. Because it is a very different town than
it is. I mean,
than DC or ZC, Syracuse, or New York, and that sort of thing. The thing that's more frustrating, the thing that frustrates me, is that they're fucking based in DC. They're based in New York. The large number of these organizations that I'm talking about being frustrated with that they're not doing anything.
Well, they have the research. I mean, you know, you reminded me of some, you know, just a very quick aside, like, you know, the passing out hand warmers and things like that. I'm like, dude, we do that.
Yeah,
like, we literally do that. Like, not only does like, I mean, during the beginning, you know, when people were protesting, you know, in the wake of, you know, George Floyd, which was at the very beginning of COVID, you know, people were out there there were just random ass people who are like, hey, I got a 2-liter bottle of hand sanitizer, just passing it, you know, passing pumps to marchers, you know, people who are like, hey, do you need a mask? You know, hey, we got, you know,
but that's random people. Like, this is this is like one of the really frustrating things. It's like, it's random people. It's not, but well,
it's not these well-funded organizations
that have the money to do it. It's like,
it's the same. You know, it's the same, you know, going back to DC with this, you know, you have all of these conspiracy theorists who are like, oh, you know, January 6th was a plot by, you know, the radical left and Antifa and anarchists. And I'm like, dude, here's the thing. If that was, you would have seen a Food Not Bombs table open up immediately in front of the Capitol. You would have seen phone charging stations. You would have seen, you know, baby changing stations. There would have been somebody running a printing press right then and there. None of that happened. But that's the shit that happens. But that's the shit that happens when more radical organizations who have done this for, you know, who have done the street level
stuff. You know how I know January 6th wasn't done the left? Is because I did not see, and I've gone through many photos and videos and everything like that. I've seen everything. There was not a single free Mumia sign anywhere. that is actually, like, I actually haven't seen those in ages. Like, I actually saw one last year. There was like one person that had a sign, and I'm like, God damn. It was just like, I saw at the anti-mandate, in quotes, I'm putting up quotes, anti-vax rally. I saw a LaRouche pack, like a homemade thing, and I was like, LaRouche pack, and I'm like, God damn. I just aged. Like, I felt like that scene at the end of Saving Private Ryan when Matt Damon ages like 20 years, 40 years. I'm like,
I saw that, and I realized that I haven't seen a LaRouche since probably 2003 or 4. Like, I mean, because he died, right?
He's long dead. Yeah,
he's long dead, right? Yeah. Like, that's another interesting thing that showed up recently. But like, man, that takes.
God, he's actually not that long dead. He died. He passed away in 2019.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. Wow. Well, I mean, again, like, nobody. I mean, you know.
I love though that, like, I posted that photo and I was just like, there's a name I haven't seen in a while. And like, everyone was like commenting on Biden, the badly photoshopped image was Biden supposedly in a Nazi costume, even though somebody pointed out that it actually is likely Egyptian military. Like, so they put him in an Egyptian military costume and then added a swastika to it. Which is like its own levels of like, what is going on? But it just was like, oh man, that's stage. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, we've been doing this for an hour now.
Yeah, I think we've come to a logical endpoint of like, okay, so our first show of the year is us. It's the airing of grievances that we should have done earlier.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
hey, why not celebrate the new year by airing your grievances so you can get back to trying to survive in this absolute
the next episode will
hellscape.
and this is a through Seinfeld, through Larry David, through oh my god, Cynthia, what's her last name, Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s wife reference. But like next episode we'll talk about how we're all gonna fucking kill ourselves because oh my god, how depressing it is to watch Bobby Kennedy go on a stage.
Oh,
as somebody who's written and like I've been really about this because I don't want anyone to ever be like, well, you used to work with Bobby. I'm like, I used to work with Bobby. I wrote a fucking voting rights comic book with Bobby, and actually I don't have any copies with me here. And I'm like, it is like 4 years of my fucking life's work are like just because and voting rights. I mean, it's like I've talked to people in the at Waterkeeper, and they're just like, what? I don't know what we do. Like fucking like it's not just like it is like Public Citizen does a really if you say be like, oh, Public Citizen and Ralph Nader, they're like, hey, wait a minute, we haven't been associated with Ralph Nader for decades. No, like immediate. But like Waterkeeper, it's like, oh my god
what happened? I mean, that's it. I think that is the next episode. As you said.
I mean, he has lost. I mean, I'm still like considering like trying to reach out to him to try to get like an interview about that subject. Obviously not live and not in very, and edited and that sort of thing. Mainly because I'm out of curiosity. Because I mean, like, I just think about how many conversations I've had with him, how many times I've interviewed him. I had dinner at his house with his kid. Nothing whatsoever. I saw his bookshelves, nothing whatsoever. I knew that he was not anti-vax, but like vaccine hesitancy or whatever, which Hollywood, like kind of like there's a certain level of rich people that like immediately get into that world. Like if you've ever spent any time in Hollywood or any time like around those folks, like half the people are like, oh, well, it's like a green living thing, less than it's like an anti-Monsanto green living thing, more so than it is anti-vax. But
it's the confluence of various,
it's, I mean, like the number of hippies, the number of hippies that are anti-vax, I mean, you like, you go to a Fish concert and you probably find more anti-vaxxers than, but like, I don't know, I mean, I have no idea, but
I think that's a whole other episode as well, because, you can't talk about that without talking about, Jenny McCarthy, etc. And again, as the resident, super cranky old person, I'm like, dude, people tell you these people were telling you who they are 20 damn years ago. It's just, they kept the quiet parts quiet. And now they've just decided to say the loud parts loud. Not saying that Bobby was doing that to you, but because, at some point, people just decide, hey, I'm going to get in on this grift.
Yeah. But I mean, it's always interesting because it's like, there's a lot of people who you talk to them for like, get a couple drinks or do something like that. And then you find out that they're, they got some weird opinions, but everybody has some weird fucking opinions. I mean, and like, like whether or not you're hesitant about like certain things or something like that, like it's relatively the number of like lefties who have gotten all their shots, very pro-vaccine, who are still though hesitant about like the grouping of shots that kids have early on and things like that. Like I've talked to many people who are like not just pro-vaccine, they're like, when's the next booster, because I want it now sort of level, but they're still like in that world where there's like, okay, kind of a reason thing, like it's kind of the same idea where it's just like look at, I got the Johnson & Johnson shot. Like, I want to mix them all. And like, I don't trust pharmaceutical companies as far as I could throw their corporate lobbies. Like I have, it's like, I'm on mental health meds. But do I trust pharmaceutical companies? Like, no. Do I still take the meds? Yes. And so like, it's obviously always this complicated thought process, but it's very interesting to watch people go from that to where a lot of the kind of the mass movement that is now, especially considering it has been, I have always viewed the anti-vax movement as more of a left move, far left movement than a right-wing movement. And now it has been completely taken over. But that is, again, another episode, which we'll have to try to do one next week. So
I was going to say, oh, so you didn't hear me say hard disagree, but hard disagree on the left thing. But, you know, there absolutely is a pipeline that has existed for years, you know, that takes you from new agey hippie stuff to anti-vax stuff to literal fascism in 3 easy steps.
Yep.
And part of that goes into, oh God, I don't even want to get into it, man.
it's what I like to call the grift drift.
It is, but you know, it's also insidious, and it all just really, it's painful. It's painful. Yep. You know? But that is another episode, I think. So we'll have to, we'll have to make sure that we do one soon.
Where can people find you, find your work, Aaron, and follow you?
You could find me on Twitter at Aaron Cynic, on Instagram at Aaron Cynic, and on Patreon at, guess what? Patreon.com/Aaron Cynic. It's all the same.
Yeah, same with mine. You can't find me at Aaron Cynic, but you can find me at ZD Roberts on Twitter, and Patreon, patreon.com. ZD Roberts. If you want to support the hosting of this show and everything that goes along with Visu.news, that would be also at patreon.com. ZD Roberts, please do that, especially considering many publications no longer have any interest in covering the far right or whatever, because we don't want to platform them, which was a recent response to a pitch that I sent. I guess that we're all done with that too. So anyway, please focus on my Patreon and also Aaron's Patreon as well. Anyway, thanks for coming on, Aaron.